everyone. Welcome back to another episode of my podcast. I'm Caroline Chen, and I'm a rising senior in high school. Today, I had the wonderful opportunity to speak with Miss Sarah Hanawald. Miss Hanawald is the executive director of the Association of Academic Leaders, an organization that she helped create that connects, supports, and amplifies the work of school leadership across the United States. With over 30 years of experience in the field of education, she was also a foundational leader and former head of the Association for Technology Leaders in Independent Schools. In our conversation today, we talk about how Ms. Hanawald got into the field of education. We talk about the power of connecting academic leaders and the impact that can have on students. We talk about her perspective on AI and productive struggle, and the idea of twinning assessments, and so much more. And I can't wait to share what we discussed with you all. So without further ado, let's get into it. Hi, thank you again so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I really appreciate it. And before we kind of get into education and topics like that, I kind of wanted to ask you a bit about your own personal journey, which is personally my favorite part of my conversations. So I was wondering what inspired you to pursue education as a career path, and when you were a high schooler, did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
Well, Caroline, thank you so much for having me here today. It was an honor to be asked, so thank you. And I love this question when I get it because no, I had no idea that I wanted to get into education. I was an avid reader and I loved books, and I worked on our literary magazine in high school and then again in college, and I was just positive that I wanted to go into book publishing or magazine publishing. And it turns out that that's not always the most amazing career if you are an avid reader, because you see, like, your favorite author sends in a manuscript and it's like practically illiterate. Like six people have to get involved in the copy editing, and the stories are there, and the really good writers have phrases of language that haunt you. But just seeing all that made was not exactly anyway, it didn't speak to me. And the company that I worked for had a program where we went to a local high school and did some tutoring because we were a company that sold books, right? So improving literacy is actually getting the next round of customers ready to buy your books. And I just found that that was my favorite time of the week, was the time that I spent with kids helping them learn to read. And so I pivoted, I went back to grad school, and I got a master's in teaching, and that is how I ended up in the classroom.
Wow, that's so cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that definitely has something like I think very rarely I hear someone who said, "Oh, I knew I wanted to go into education when I was in high school." Like it's always been, "Oh, it's something I discovered along the way." And yeah, that's super cool how I never really thought about book publishing as like something where you had to like go through the weeds of a manuscript before, because I feel like I don't really hear about that career path very often. So that's super interesting. And I know you've had a very like extensive, amazing like length of experience within the field of education. And I was
Such a
wondering,
nice way of saying you're one of my older people that I've
no,
talked with.
that's not what
I'm
I mean. Yeah,
teasing
sorry.
you.
I just couldn't think of how to phrase it. Yeah. I was saying how you've like you definitely have done a lot when I was doing my research for this podcast. Like it's honestly very insane everything you've done. And I was wondering if you could possibly take us through the journey or like as much as you want to share about like your career and how you
Sure.
where you are now.
Yeah, I'll give you the elevator pitch or the short version. But when I started in education, I was in a classroom and I was the resource teacher for middle school, and I worked with kids on reading and writing and some executive function skills, but really these were kids who needed to grow in that area. And independent schools are kind of funny places. Like the number of students that I worked with meant that I wasn't exactly a full-time teacher, but I was an advisor too. And then I'm going to age myself here. Across the hall were these six, I'm going to say what they were, and people who are older who listen will know this, grape iMacs. And so they used to make these iMacs that were for school that looked sort of toy-like, but they were still real computers. And the the middle school head said, you seem to know your way around technology better than any of us do here. If you could keep this lab up and running, then we could make you a full-time employee. And one of the things that I realized is that they had never connected them all together to networks. So the kids used to have to work on a computer, save it to a disk, and then carry the disk across to the computer that was attached to the printer. And I was young and fearless, and so I got some cabling and crawled underneath all of the computers and connected everybody so everybody can print. And you would have thought that that was like computer science from the way everyone responded. And within a few years, I ended up being a tech director for the school. And so since then, I kind of went back and forth between technology and teaching and learning, and I'm really interested in where they intersect. And so I found, for example, that those kids who had real writing block would sometimes make a slide deck, right, with just a sentence per slide. And they would do that when, if you gave them just a blank word processing document or paper and pencil, they would just kind of sit and feel stuck because it was intimidating. But and so that got me interested in how can we use technology to help kids tackle learning tasks in ways that support how they need to learn. And that, worked out for the last 30 years as a career. And what's fascinating is right now, and probably the last few years before I retire, generative AI is making us rethink all over again that relationship between technology and our brains, and when are we learning and when are we not, and how do we know? So that's the long version of the short version.
Yeah, that's so cool. And yeah, I can't imagine needing to carry a physical disc over to a printer to print.
Right.
Like, like I always complain about how my MacBook can never connect to a printer through Bluetooth, but like now I feel like I have no right to complain being born into such
It's
a
all moved and
yeah, I'm taking
fast
things for
paced.
granted. Yeah, and I also saw that you lead an organization called One Schoolhouse. Is
We're a part of One Schoolhouse.
you're
So
a
One
part of One Schoolhouse?
Schoolhouse started 15 years ago, maybe
Mhm.
16 actually now, as online school for girls. And it was super interesting because it was for girls' schools who were having a hard time finding computer science teachers.
Oh.
Because back in the day, it was hard to find somebody to teach computer science. And, schools don't pay what the tech industry does. And so it's kind of one of those things. And so these four schools looked at online options and they didn't think that it was up to the standards of what an independent school should offer. So they decided to band together and they had one teacher who taught girls in all four schools computer science. And I think it was one teacher and maybe 12 students. And now it's 100 and some odd teachers and a couple of thousand students. But at one point in our history, we had more girls taking computer science and taking the AP computer science exam than something like 16 states put together.
My God, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that, like, when you think about how the world has changed, right? Like, girls in STEM is very much more a thing now than it was early career. And
Mhm.
that was just 15 years ago.
Uh-huh.
So, as part of that, we ended up working and I was at a school and I had students enrolled in One Schoolhouse, and it's changed from being online school for girls because it turned out that boys like to take online classes too, and that our classes are high quality. And so now we have, and there are other people in the market, so it's a real thing, right? It's not like this, you're taking an online class, right? So like people just take online classes. And so we also realized at the same time that there are a lot of people in schools who are the only person who has their job. There's usually only one academic dean. There's usually only one curriculum coordinator. There's usually only one science department chair. And so they don't really know people who have the same job as them. And so we connect people to other people who do similar work so they can compare ideas, learn from each other, and connect. And that's the Association for Academic Leaders. And it's what I wished I'd had when I was an academic dean. And the person who'd had the job before me had left. Nobody else at the school had ever been an academic dean. And I got the job and I was excited. And I was there, I was going, well, what do I do? So um, now there's an organization that helps you figure out what it is you do.
Wow, that's so cool. And that's really cool how you're able to like compare like the way things have changed throughout the years. And I was also wondering, kind of as a follow-up to that, because I know you've worked in a lot of different educational settings, like whether it be one schoolhouse or as a teacher, but throughout all these experiences, like have there been any like impactful experiences or like moments that have kind of shaped the way that you approach education now?
Yeah, I think one that I alluded to was seeing a student who everybody called a reluctant writer
Mhm.
sit down at a computer with it's a program that isn't around anymore, but it was like Google Slides.
Mhm.
And so I said, how about you just put three words on a slide and then you start a new one and you put three words on that and you put three words on that. And he realized at the end that he'd written the longest first draft he'd ever written in
Wow.
his life because it was in chunks.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, this means something. I'm not sure what, but it means something. And so that was one piece in my career. And then the other was when I was at a school and I had a student, and this was before I even knew about online school for girls. And I had a student whose family had moved their junior year, which is a really tough year to move, um, kind of across the country. And they really all wanted to come. And so I was sitting and talking to the student, and they said, I don't want to start another language, and y'all don't have German. And, I'm seeing with all of these college applications that I need to take the third year of German, right? I have 2 years of German under my belt. I know I can switch to another language, and that technically meets the 3 year requirement. And then I can explain why it is that I have this disruption. But I just really want to take German, Dean Hanawald. And I said, let me see what I could do because I just started hearing about online courses and that this was a possibility. And I just remember the joy that their whole family had when I was like, yeah, you can take German and you're going to have 3 years of German on your transcript. And so it wasn't that it was the best German class ever or that but here's this kid who's had to move across country, give up so much their junior year. And then this was a little something that we could do. And it taught me a couple of things. One, it taught me about online courses, but it also taught me about what it means when you look at your school's policies and your programs, and then you look at the person sitting in the room with you, and you try to figure out a way to make it work. Not just, well, this is what we have and this is what you have to do. And people have different schools of thought around that. Some people would say, oh, the minute you start reworking things for individuals, you make everything more complicated and then you have to do it again. And I don't, that's just not my philosophy. So I learned a lot about myself through that.
Yeah, uh-huh. And that's definitely a like really powerful moment, I guess, because it shows how like such a small thing could like mean something so much to like someone else. Sorry, I'm not like the words
Yeah.
fully forming, but
I mean, I don't know that they'll remember me at all, but they'll remember that the German happened,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
for sure.
And
Uh-huh.
that's the other thing. You have to be humble if you want to get into academic leadership because if I'm doing my job right,
Mhm.
kids feel like they have the most amazing teachers ever and that the school is all working and they don't know I'm doing anything.
Yeah, for sure. I think definitely thinking about it from the perspective of who you're, because I do a lot of teaching for like elementary schoolers and even younger kids. And often when doing so, you have to put yourself in their shoes and be like, okay, they're looking up at someone that they see as a 20-year-old. Like, what would I think? Like, I've actually asked kids, like, how old do you think I am? And they've been like, you're 35. And I'm like, no. Like you're gonna have that number a little bit. But it's just kind of like the whole thing of putting yourself in someone else's shoes that I don't know, personally, I've experienced a lot throughout like teaching younger, like mentoring younger students, because I think if you're only thinking about it from your perspective and how you think it'll benefit them, it definitely shifts the dynamic between
Yeah,
whoever you're teaching.
that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and sorry, that was also another little bit of a tangent. And kind of moving on from that, you currently serve as the executive director for the Association of Academic Leaders. And I was wondering if you could explain kind of what your role entails and yeah, what you do in that position.
Sure. So first of all, I'll tell you, I have the best job in the world in so many ways, and my personal professional mission is to connect and amplify. So I like to connect people who are doing really amazing work because one of the things that I've learned in the three schools that I worked in and then now doing association work is every school has people who are doing amazing work at their schools who are not interested in, saying, hey, look at me, or I'm going to give a conference presentation, or I'm going to write a paper about this. They're just quietly doing really powerful work and helping kids every day. And then my mission is to help people see that maybe they can help even more kids by, like, I do what you're doing, right? I interview people and then I'll share the video in a class that we teach or in a webinar. And then I'll also connect them to people who do similar work but are innovating in a different way. And I love it when I introduce people in a Zoom and I see them just sort of take off and start planning in a conversation and they're going to connect later on. And I'm like, all right, my work here is done. And so both of those schools, students, are going to have an even better experience because I connected those two people. But clearly, it has nothing to do with me except for I'm the way that it happens.
That's so cool. Yeah, because like once you think about it, it's not just about the two people, it's about all the students that those two people subsequently impact throughout whatever work they
Exactly.
end up doing. Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so cool.
That's fun. So I
Um,
teach classes. I look for interesting ideas. I read a lot of newsletters and articles to figure out what to share
yeah.
with
Mhm.
people. I feel like I'm often in the job of translating. So I'll read Harvard Business Review and say, okay, well, what does this have to do with what school people are doing right now? And I'll
Mhm.
kind of translate it that way. And generative AI is very helpful in doing that. So,
Yeah. And kind of just like building off of that, I was wondering because you mentioned like acad like papers relating to education and research in that regard. And personally, I've only done like original research through like organic chemistry and just like very STEM-based
oof.
research. I know it's very different. And I was kind of wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on how, if you want to, on how like research in this regard works and like, yeah.
Sure. So research and education is really tough
Hmm.
because what you can't do is do a total controlled study where you have two groups that are exactly the same, except that you use one particular kind of learning with one and then something else with another, right? Like
Like the
people don't
variables
work that way.
are harder to control.
Um, and so what you have to do in research is figure out what is it that you think that you can find? How are you going to take an element of learning, and I'm going to be struggling here a little bit. Oh, actually, I have a good example. Have you ever used Geometer Sketchpad?
No, I have not.
So it may not even be around, or it might have been bought by something else, but it was an online, and first it was just computer based, geometry tutoring tool
Oh.
that's probably 20, 30 years old at this point. Well, probably 20. And what it let students do was draw out the sketches of the equations that they were learning and then see how a change in an equation would change the diagram that they had created or the object that they had created.
Mhm.
And what the teachers found out is they'd been teaching geometry for years. And they did a really good job of aligning, there were two teachers aligning their curriculum so it was just the same.
Mhm.
And then they they decided that one of them was kind of excited about the software and the other one wasn't. And because they were confident that their classes were really similar, they found out that the group that got the software the first year that they piloted it did they finished the semester earlier and their grades were higher. So they covered more material and their grades had gone up. And so that convinced the other teacher, oh, I got to start using this software. Um, so that's about as close as you can get to the kind of blind study. So a lot of times what you're doing in research is an individual teacher or school is trying something, seeing how it benefits kids, adjusting it on the fly, and that's what teachers do better than any software is okay, Caroline needs me to present this in this kind of way, but Sarah is going to want to read the text first and then have a conversation about it. And that's what good teachers do.
Mhm.
So that's why it's connecting people, which is so much more powerful than any other way of help encouraging people to think about their practice.
Yeah, for sure. That's so interesting and kind of just like connecting back to what I was talking about with like more scientific research. I think it's like what you touched on in terms of like people doing amazing work, but it not being shared with the broader community. That's something that I never really thought about from a scientific research perspective because there the whole point is to like present at conferences and like publish your findings before other people do. And it's like stuff like that. So the aspect, like the more human aspect and arguably like the impact of it, I think is super
Right.
powerful.
Like your school has things that are really special about it, and somebody else could go to a different school and they don't get to do those things, but they
Yeah.
get to do something else,
Yeah, and it's just the
right?
whole like the impact of it, like the scale of it, I think. Like I think what you said about connecting people and communities, that's super amazing. And I also was wondering, is this Association for Academic Leaders how you know Mr. Pitt who connected us? Or
Yeah. So can I call him Peter on the podcast? I don't know. We have known each other now for oh gosh, maybe 12 years,
oh
something like
wow.
that. So even though I was in North Carolina, and this is why I love connecting people, right? And he was in California, he had some really interesting ideas about how schools can hire people with the potential to be technology leaders. And he was an early advocate for being connected in the community with the other schools, even when he was on the East Coast. I think he was in the Boston area. So he's connected to other people there, and then he moved to California. And California tech industry, big time. So how does a school, which is paying a completely different kind of salary, hire somebody with technical skills,
Mhm.
right? And so you have to look for people who are really kind of special. So he just became known for helping develop tech leadership in people who might not otherwise have gotten into that. And so he was one of the first faculty members in a program designed to help people become independent school technology leaders.
Mhm.
And
Wow.
just
Is that
is so generous with his knowledge and his time, and he's so kind. I'm
yeah.
sure you experience that, like when you get off frustrated and everything, he's like, "Well,
Yeah.
let's,
We love
try this."
if he's listening. Yeah, thank you for being such a great guy.
Yeah, he's fabulous.
He is. Yeah, that's so cool. And because I saw you had also led I think the Association of Technology. I think I'm getting the name wrong, but
Yeah, that was my first association job, was the Association for Technology Leaders in Independent Schools, which I was one of the people who helped to get it going. And then now it's much bigger than it ever was then. I would say that for me, what was important about that work was the idea that these people didn't necessarily get the recognition that they deserved, especially back then. A lot of the tech leaders, it was like, oh, they're just the people who make the tech work. And of course they are. And they're just very unsung. And so establishing a professional association for them really felt good.
that's so cool. And like coming from someone who also has experience kind of like building a program that didn't really exist before, like what was it like shaping this association and like what was the journey of doing this?
That's an interesting question. Um, 'Cause it's kind of when you do that work, you're in two places at once. One is that you're talking to the people who are actually doing the work,
Mm,
right? Like, oh, I really value what you're doing and I want, more people to know about what you do. And for some people, it was like, oh no, no, I would never want to do that. And for others, they're like, really? You care? That's amazing. But then at the same time, you're also trying to convince their school leadership, hey, you've got people who work on your campus who you're not guiding and appreciating enough. You're seeing them as just somebody, oh, if they quit, we can hire another one. And you need to appreciate them more and need to understand how much they contribute to the well-being of the students and faculty at school.
mm.
So it's kind of in both of those areas.
Yeah, and you said you built you kind of like built the organization. So like what was the process of doing that and connecting so many different, because I know that's like a pretty big part of your job, but like what was it like?
Yeah. So the first year of Atlas, we had 12 schools who
Hmm.
had said, okay, we'll do that. And that was fascinating, right? Because that is not enough to have an association. So the first
And
part,
it was like the dem sorry to cut you off, but like was
yeah.
it all from the similar region or like was it like across the US or
There was a lot of California, but at that point, there was also, for lack of a better term, I've been around for a long time, so I knew a lot of people. So the first sort of growth was kind of me calling up every tech director I knew and saying, hey, you need to join this. So I spent that first year just recruiting
Mm,
and getting people in. And so was that was fun. I'd never done sales. And essentially it's sales,
same here.
right? It's a, hey,
Hmm.
you know, and it was asking people to commit without there being a lot there, right? It's like in the tech world, you call those folks angel investors.
Oh yeah, I've heard of that term. Yeah.
Yeah, people who say, "Yeah, okay, I'll put some money up because I want this to happen." So even though you don't have a lot of benefits right now, like the newsletter was something I was writing once a month, like sitting down going, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to write in the newsletter this month?" Um, but people wanted it to exist, and then because they wanted it to exist, people like Mr. Intupit volunteered,
Mm-hmm.
right, and helped with their wisdom and their insight, and then other people said, "Oh, I want to be a part of that."
Oh,
And
so Crystal or like Crystal
yeah,
was for schools to be.
definitely an early participant.
Uh-huh.
And a lot of the people who were those early participants are still very important in this field and in that work. When I left, Atlas was ready to stop being a startup and ready to be a real thing. And so they hired somebody who had a lot of experience leading associations. And that's been the way that organization has gone.
Mhm.
And I think there's 500 schools, like
Oh my
wild
God,
success,
wow.
right? Like I'm really proud that I was there at the beginning, but the person who came behind me, like really formalized a lot of what we did with volunteers and that kind of work. And so it's been really fun to see
Mhm.
that association become necessary. And so it's been fun to get to do it again with academic leaders
Oh, so
and sort
those
of learn from my mistakes.
they're kind of separate, like the two associations, they're
Yeah.
not connected, even though they
Nope.
have pretty similar names. Oh, wow. So you essentially repeated the process with the current.
Yeah, but with underneath an umbrella organization. So one schoolhouse has an academic program
Mhm.
for online learning, and then we have the Association for Academic Leaders. So I lead the association side
Oh,
of our organization, and we're just 4 years old.
uh,
So that's been really fun.
yeah. And that's so cool. And thinking, I think you touched on like learning from mistakes that you went through throughout the way. And I was wondering, are you open to sharing like what were some learning lessons or takeaways you did throughout like the
Yes.
same process?
So don't bite off more than you can chew
Mm,
is
yeah.
probably the first one because I looked at what an association does, right? And I said, okay, so we need a newsletter and we need webinars and and yeah, I think in hindsight, like I have this association now with all of those things,
Mhm.
but A, I don't do it all by myself.
Mhm.
And B, we stepped into things a little bit slowly and I prioritized things that didn't have to have like hard and fast deadlines.
Mm.
Right? So if you are going to do a newsletter a month, you had better get it out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And once a month. And so if that turns out to be a month where you have to do eight other things, um, and the other thing that I learned is that event planning is
Mhm.
really big work. So Atlas has
I,
a big annual conference with a lot of people at it.
uh-huh.
The Association for Academic Leaders, we do not have a great big conference with a lot of people at it. And we may at some time, but that will only happen when there are enough people working here that I can be like, yeah, let's do it.
We can do it as a team. Yeah, that's so cool. And yeah, thanks for sharing your experiences and coming from someone. I mean, personally, I just wanted to say, like, that's really insane, like building two separate organizations. Because when it comes to kind of creating programs personally, like touching on my own experience, I've always had a really insanely great support network, including people like Mr. Anifit who have just like been willing to like support us throughout the journey, like no matter like not knowing a specific endpoint or goal. But I
Mhm.
can't imagine like doing that from scratch without like people helping or like being there to like advocate or like I don't know. Well, like I guess it's different for me because it's within a school context, but like just doing that from scratch. Sorry, I'm like rambling again, but it's like
Yeah, no, I think though that you have a really good idea of what it's like because most of the people, like the adults around you, right? It's their job to support you, but not necessarily if you're doing something extra, then they're kind of volunteering and they're doing something
yeah,
extra too.
exactly. Like you have to be able to recognize like, hey, this isn't their job. Like they're taking time out of their own schedules to work with you and like
Yeah,
yeah.
and volunteer appreciation is a real thing, right? So
Yeah.
that when we started Atlas, everybody except for me was a volunteer, and
Oh wow.
I was definitely like, um, probably shouldn't talk about that too much, but I was definitely sort of part-time and doing it, but really working full time, and so everybody's doing a little extra when you're starting something,
Yeah.
and you just have to appreciate that.
Yeah. And I guess I also had a question about leadership, like kind of going a little bit off topic, but I know, like you said, your organization like dramatically expanded from, I think you said 12 to over 500
Well,
schools.
not under me.
Not
So
in
for me, I got it from 12 to I think 150 or so.
still, but
So,
that's a really
and
big,
then, when I left, it was like, and then they did it again, like more
yeah.
than double.
And I think personally for me, like one of the biggest learning curves when it came to leadership was recognizing that I think you said this earlier, but you can't do everything yourself. Like this, no, I don't think you said this, but it's kind of just like being able to have the ability to let things go and trust other people to run things. And it's like you can't show up to every meeting or like micromanage every single task. Um,
Right.
and I was wondering, did you feel anything similar to that in your like leadership or not so much? I don't know. I was just wondering.
So yeah, I think the hardest part is that you will have to, when you lead, let go of the idea that everybody working for you is going to do things the way you would do it if you could.
Yeah.
It's like, no,
hmm
you've got really smart, thoughtful, capable people working here, and they're going to go in a different direction
Oh
than
yeah.
you would have done something,
hmm
and it will work. It doesn't mean that yours wouldn't have worked. Like it's not a binary, this will work and this won't work. It's like you could do it this way or you could do it that way, and they're both acceptable. And if you want everybody to do things the way that you would do it, you're going to be pretty frustrated, or you're going to frustrate everybody who works for you, and you're not going to be able to keep people.
Yeah. And additionally, I think a conversation I've had with some adults is like just like letting people like letting them both like go their own path. But if you notice something probably isn't the most efficient or effective way, you have to just let them go through it because if you keep patching up behind them, like they're never gonna grow as leaders themselves. And that's something that I've also taken away from the process because it's kind of like you have to accept that not everything's going to be perfect and not everything's going to go the way you want it to go, but it's kind of just like you said, like there's many different ways and it'll most likely it'll turn out fine, but it's just like trusting that process. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's where, when you have a really thoughtful, reflective, intelligent person working with you, and they have something go wrong, really making space to say, well, tell me what happened.
Yeah.
Okay, well, what do you think about that?
Mhm.
And if you do it in a non, like, what did you learn from your mistake and how are you, like that feels judged. But if you just say, okay, well, tell me about it. Okay, what are your takeaways?
Yeah, it's just like the whole like the framing or like the way you approach it. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, no. And then somebody who is thoughtful and intelligent is going to say, what I think I want to do next time is, or they'll say, can I run this by you?
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely making sure that you lift people up and you like focus on the
Hmm.
positive takeaways out of things. And
Yeah, because I'm going to retire someday and somebody else is going to need to do all of this. And so if I've made everything dependent on me, then that's terrible.
yeah, for sure. And yeah, thank you so much for going off on that little tangent about like working with people leadership with me. And now I kind of wanted to shift the conversation to like more education and technology and like the field that you've been working in and had such a huge impact in. And I was wondering, because I know your work helps schools navigate these massive technology shifts, including the rise of AI in education. And from your perspective, how can schools like balance the use of AI as like a helpful tool while still making sure that students, whether it be middle or high school or like across all ages, still experience the productive struggle that is necessary in order to build like resilience, critical thinking, and actually initiate learning?
So I love that you said productive struggle because it is true, right? Like that is how cognitive friction is how we learn, right? So when something is hard and then there's this, we call it ZPD, the zone of proximal development, I think. And so it's when something is just like a teeny bit too hard for you. And so
Mhm.
you have to reach and stretch and push. So if it's way too hard, then you just get frustrated. You shut down. If it's too easy, then you spend all day spinning and you don't learn anything. So you need that like just a little bit too hard so you learn. And that is something that I think we as adults on campus need to teach kids really well. Like, I'm asking you to do this because, and we should always be doing that, right? Kids should always know the why behind what they're being asked to do. And hopefully what I think generative AI has done is it's not just presented new problems, right? Like yeah, now we can have an essay that looks like you thought really carefully about two works of literature.
Mhm.
But honestly, since when did the product itself be the only representation of what a student knew and understood and could do? So we're having to ask some questions that we have been asking for a long time anyway.
Mhm.
So it's kind of a both and. I think that also teachers are really good at understanding the developmental needs of the kids in the room. And if it's our littlest learners, there's not really a lot of reasons for them to be interacting with AI because they still think that, Alexa is a person.
Yeah.
Right? So like let's not mess around too much there.
Sure. Like,
With high schoolers, I mean, one of the things that we know is when you go off to college that it's like the Wild West and there's cheating everywhere and kids are cheating their own selves out of an education. And so I think the schools that are doing the best job are asking kids things like, did my use of AI help me learn more, or did it help me make a shortcut and cheat myself out of some learning? And kids can answer those questions if we ask them to.
mhm.
They
And
know.
yeah, for sure. And I definitely see a lot of what you're saying in regards to like, I think like so many people have brought up the whole thing of the ZPD and like the zone of productive struggle because I think a lot of people view it as like productive struggle is good and it's like we need it, but then like they don't really think about the upper limit or like people who don't know about it don't really think about the upper limit of like when is it too much? And also when you talked about like the age and like the self-awareness of kids. Because I feel like you touched on elementary schoolers and high schoolers, but when it comes to middle school, I feel like I think I see or like from what I've talked, because I talk with a lot of younger students and like rising freshmen have told me how like AI has completely like gone through into the middle school experience. And I think personally I was a very lazy middle schooler. If I had AI, I don't think I would have learned, period. Like my parents put me into math tutoring and I found this website that had all the answers to all of the questions from the math tutoring and that thing carried me through the entire thing. But it's kind of just like the when they have the ability to be like, hey, I can use this to shortcut, but they don't have the awareness that like, hey, I'm not gaining anything from this. Like, I'm not actually learning the material. I think that's when it could be a really big problem for students as a whole, because like you said that the process is important. It's not just the outcome when it comes to stuff like the essay, but like in what ways do you think we could actually judge the process, especially as
Oh my gosh. All right, you don't have this kind of time. We have a class on assessing assessments
Uh-huh.
right now. and
For
we
teachers?
offer for independent school administrators
Oh,
and department chairs and those kinds
um,
of folks. So I this is an area that I spend a lot of time doing research on, and so there's different ways to get at this, but what I think is going to make the big comeback is called sort of twinning, assessment twinning. And so if I'm teaching literature, I also taught high school English, and I want kids to write about trying to think of it. Let's talk about Jane Austen for a little bit. And, what does it mean to have power in Jane Austen's description of the Edwardian ballroom? So I can read an essay and it can be, well done and pretty interesting. And it can talk about, what Mrs. Bennet does and blah, 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 blah. But then if I ask the student, I say, okay, so Caroline, tell me some parallels you see in our world to what you described in that ballroom scene. And you can't do it,
mhm,
right? Then, oh, so you didn't really learn something that you can transfer to a new made way of thinking and talk about. And so if kids know, okay, I'm not going to just write an essay, I'm also going to have to defend it. So then maybe using AI to help you write the essay could be good things, right? Like help me find an example in the text of this or help me think about this. But now you're having a conversation with the AI and you're using it to tutor you in growing your own ability to think critically about the text. And a lot of people say use AI for brainstorming. I'd rather people brainstorm first and then use AI to help you support your creativity, right? Brainstorming is where you're creative and then there's some grunt work in the middle.
exactly.
And I get that from my publishing background, right? Like writers wrote these really creative books and they were a big old mess, right? So that's where, it's still their voice, but somebody else helps. So that's kind of my thinking that we're going to do a lot more of it's going to take time.
Mhm.
And that is where independent schools, I think, are really going to do well because we know our students better than somebody who has 180 kids going through English 11 and they only write two essays all year because that's as many as somebody can grade.
Mhm. Definitely. The act of explaining something back definitely can prove to yourself whether you genuinely understand a concept or not. Like, one way I love to study is personally just like practicing explaining something, whether it be writing something down or like talking to a friend or stuff like that. And I think I've never heard of that, like the twinning form or like I know how to describe it, but like technique, I guess, before, but that's super interesting. And yeah, I've seen that in some like not activities, but like assessments and stuff that I've been doing during my past junior year. And I won't go into detail because I know we're running out of time. But yeah, that's super cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I just had one final question for you before we end our conversation, which is if you could tell your high school self one thing that you know today after all these years, what would it be? And yeah.
So the first thing that I would tell her is that the thing that she did right was I was a voracious reader. I would read everything. I read mysteries and I read classics and I read romance.
Mhm.
Love romantasy now, right? I think all genres have value, and I think that reading fiction teaches you to empathize with somebody who is completely unlike you,
Mhm.
right? Whether it's like vampires from another planet, right? Like if you can empathize with them, then you can certainly empathize with your neighbor who has a different background than you do,
Yeah.
right? So I think reading fiction is the best thing that you could do. And then I bet you everybody says this, like, don't sweat the small stuff. Like the stuff that I angsted and agonized over. I wish that I could have just rolled with things a little bit more because I know we talk about kids now are so worried about grades. We were back then too, and anybody who says that they weren't is not telling the truth. Like I worried about every grade and I worried about
Thank
every
you for
paper.
saying that. Thank
Ugh.
you for saying that. Yeah. I hate it when people are like, oh, like this one essay will not it will not affect anything. But I feel like at least in our world, there's not really anything you can do. to like,
It's hard. And so I wish that on my younger self. And so that's why I wish it for everybody who's in high school right now.
Mhm. Yeah, and just like one final follow-up to that, like, do you have any advice for, as like such an experienced leader, do you have any advice for any current student leaders who want to make a positive and meaningful impact on their communities?
This is going to surprise you. Get enough sleep.
I
The
agree.
things that you do when you're too tired, they're never as good anyway. It's like you're better off just quitting, go to bed, get
Mhm.
your 8 hours, and then try again tomorrow.
Yes, that's super important, and I think a lot of people need to hear that. Because, I mean, sleep, like, I discovered last year is that, like, I'm gonna do better on a test if I don't study and sleep than if I decide to pull an all-nighter and study, because my brain will not work if I
Yep.
only have my 8 hours. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you so much for Okay, so thank you all so much for listening to my conversation with Miss Sarah Hanawald. A huge thank you to Miss Hanawald for taking the time to speak with me, and thank you all so much for listening. I'll see you guys next time.